Before temples were raised to kings, before cities claimed the land, there was a goddess who belonged to the wild. She did not rule from Olympus. She walked in forests, across mountains, under moonlit skies. Her name was Artemis. The earliest Greek poets already knew her. Homer described Artemis as a huntress with golden arrows, roaming wild places beyond cities. Soon after, Hesiod confirmed her as the daughter of Zeus and Leto, a goddess born into Olympus, yet never bound by it. She was the huntress, the protector of wild animals, the guardian of young girls, the bringer of sudden death, and the giver of safe birth. She was both gentle and terrifying, a goddess of life's most fragile moments and its most unforgiving boundaries. Ancient Greeks did not see Artemis as merely a hunter. They saw her as something older, deeper, more primal. She belonged to the untouched world, the place where civilization had not yet reached. Even her birth reflected this independence. Artemis was the daughter of Zeus and the Titaness Leto, but her arrival into the world was surrounded by danger. When Leto became pregnant, Hera, queen of the gods, forbade any land from giving her refuge. No island, no mainland, no place under the sun was allowed to accept her. So Leto wandered, rejected everywhere, until she found a floating island called Delos, a land not fixed to earth, and therefore outside of Hera's command. There, beneath a sacred palm tree, Artemis was born. And according to ancient tradition, something extraordinary happened next. Artemis did not remain a helpless newborn. She immediately helped her mother deliver her twin brother, Apollo. From her first moment, Artemis became a protector of childbirth, a paradox that defined her forever. The eternal virgin, who safeguarded mothers, who guided life into the world. She was independence itself, never owned, never married, never controlled, and this would shape everything about her. Unlike historical figures, Artemis was not described in a single, fixed way, but we do know her appearance from ancient poetry, sculptures and vase art, and temple cult statues. Greek sculptors consistently portrayed Artemis as a young woman with athletic build, hair tied back for hunting, wearing a short chiton with a quiver on shoulder and bow in hand, often standing with a deer. One of the most famous examples is the Diana of Versailles statue, which is a Roman copy of the Greek original. Artemis did not belong to palaces. She belonged to forests untouched by human hands. The Greeks called her Potnia Theron, mistress of animals. This title appears in early Greek tradition, where Artemis is portrayed as ruler of animals, a role already visible in archaic poetry and echoed in the Homeric hymns, which describe her roaming mountains surrounded by nymphs. She moved silently through mountains, surrounded by deer, bears, and wild creatures that feared no one but her. She was not merely a hunter. She was the balance between life and death in nature. Artemis could protect animals, but she could also strike them down with flawless precision. Her arrows never missed. Her bow represented more than hunting. It symbolized the suddenness of nature itself. Just as a storm appears without warning, so too did Artemis. A healthy animal might fall in an instant. A life could end quietly, without struggle. For this reason, the Greeks believed she governed sudden deaths, especially those that came swiftly and without suffering. But she was not cruel. Artemis hunted only within the laws of nature. She punished excess. She punished arrogance. She punished those who disrespected the sacred wild, to harm animals carelessly, to hunt without reverence, to boast against the gods. These were acts Artemis did not forgive. She demanded respect for boundaries between human and wilderness, civilization and instinct, control and freedom. Even her companions reflected this. Artemis traveled with a band of nymphs, young maidens who, like her, vowed never to marry. Together they roamed mountains and forests, free from society's expectations. This was radical in the ancient world. Artemis represented a life outside traditional roles. She was not defined by marriage, motherhood, or domestic life. She was freedom. But this freedom came with strict rules. Her companions had to remain pure. Her sacred spaces could not be violated. Her authority could not be challenged. And those who crossed these boundaries learned quickly how dangerous the quiet goddess could be. Artemis was calm, but she was never forgiving. Her anger did not erupt often, but when it did, it was absolute. One of the most famous examples is the fate of Actaeon. Actaeon was a skilled hunter, proud of his abilities and confident in his mastery of the wild. One day, while wandering through the forest, he stumbled upon something forbidden. Artemis was bathing in a secluded spring, surrounded only by her nymphs. This was a sacred moment, a space untouched by mortal eyes. Whether by accident or curiosity, Actaeon saw her. In that instant, the balance was broken. Artemis did not shout. She simply took water in her hands and cast it toward him. Immediately, Actaeon began to change. Horns grew from his head. His hands became hooves. His voice vanished. He had transformed into a stag. Unable to speak, unable to explain, he fled into the forest. But the tragedy was only beginning. Actaeon's own hunting dogs caught his scent. They did not recognize their master. They saw only prey. The hounds chased him relentlessly and tore him apart. Artemis did nothing. This myth was not about cruelty, it was about boundaries. Actaeon crossed into a sacred space, and the punishment reflected that violation. To the Greeks, Artemis represented inviolable limits, especially around purity, privacy, and respect for divine authority. Her justice was not emotional. It was immediate and natural, like lightning striking a tree. And this is what made Artemis feared. Despite her severity, Artemis was also a protector. She guarded those standing at the edge of transformation, especially young girls. In ancient Greece, the transition from childhood to adulthood was dangerous and uncertain. It meant leaving safety, entering responsibility, and facing the risks of marriage and childbirth. Artemis stood at this threshold. She watched over girls before they became women. She guided them through this fragile stage of life. This role was not just myth, it existed in real ritual practice. At the sanctuary of Brauron, around 38 kilometers from Athens, young girls dedicated themselves to Artemis before adulthood. They wore saffron robes and performed sacred dances, symbolically becoming little bears in her honor. The ritual reflected Artemis's connection to the wild and the transformation from childhood into maturity. It honored the goddess who ruled both nature and growth. Though eternally unmarried, Artemis was invoked by women in labor, a role hinted at in early Greek hymns and reinforced across regional cult practices. Women prayed to her during pregnancy and called upon her when labor began. But Artemis did not only protect life, she also governed its fragility. She could ease birth or end it suddenly. Just as she ruled the wild, she ruled the unpredictable moments of human existence. Artemis was worshipped differently across the Greek world. At Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, which is now modern-day Turkey, she took on a powerful fertility role. This sanctuary became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, not only for its religious importance, but for its immense scale and beauty. Built in marble and supported by over 100 towering columns, the temple was far larger than most Greek sanctuaries. its fame spread across the ancient Mediterranean, securing Artemis a reputation far beyond Greece. In the earliest Greek poetry, including Homer, Artemis is purely a huntress of the wild. Only in later traditions did she become linked with the moon, especially in the works of Hellenistic poets like Callimachus. Under moonlight, boundaries blur, paths become uncertain. The world feels older, quieter, more instinctive. This was her domain. She hunted at night, guided travelers, and moved unseen through forests and mountains. Artemis protected the wild, but she also demanded respect. Even kings were not beyond her reach. Before the Greek fleet sailed to Troy, the army gathered at Aulis. Thousands of ships waited for wind, but the sea remained still. Days passed, then weeks. No breeze came. In ancient Greek religion, natural phenomena were seen as divine signs. If wind stopped, it meant a god was angry, a ritual error occurred, or someone committed an offense. The seer Calchas declared that the winds had been stopped by Artemis. The reason varied in different accounts. Some said that King Agamemnon had killed a deer in a sacred grove of Artemis. Others claimed he boasted that he was a better hunter than the goddess herself. Either way, he had crossed a line. Calchas declared that Artemis demanded a sacrifice. The price was unthinkable. Agamemnon must sacrifice his own daughter, Iphigenia. The king hesitated, but the army grew restless. The war depended on him. So Iphigenia was brought to Aulis under the pretense of marriage to Achilles. At the altar, the truth was revealed. In the earliest surviving recount, part of the Oresteia trilogy by Aeschylus, Iphigenia was sacrificed, and it is because of this that King Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, later kills him when he returns from Troy. In later versions, Artemis intervened at the final moment, replacing the goddess with a deer and carrying her away to serve as one of Artemis' priestess in a distant land. Both versions reveal that the wind returned only after her demand was met. This myth shows that sacred laws cannot be ignored. Power does not grant immunity. Even kings bow to the wild. Some scholars interpret this myth as the army preparing for war created ritual impurity. The fleet could not move from peace to war without ritual balance. Artemis was rarely shown sitting on a throne. Her symbols always placed her in motion, in nature, beyond civilization. Her most recognizable symbol was the bow. It represented precision, independence, and distance. Artemis did not fight up close. She acted from afar, swift and decisive. Her arrows symbolized sudden change, life ending without warning, or protection arriving in an instant. Beside her often stood the deer. The deer represented gentleness, alertness, and wild freedom. It reflected Artemis herself, calm, graceful, yet always ready to flee or strike. Unlike predators, the deer survives through awareness. This made it the perfect companion for a goddess of boundaries. Another sacred animal linked to Artemis was the bear. The bear also represented strength hidden beneath calm, a quiet but powerful force. Trees sacred to Artemis included the cypress and the oak. The cypress symbolized wilderness and solitude. The oak represented endurance and ancient strength. Together, these symbols formed a portrait of a goddess connected to the natural world in every form. Nothing about Artemis suggested luxury or power. Her authority came from something older. Artemis was more than a goddess of hunting. She represented independence in its purest form. Even the earliest sources portray her this way. In archaic Greek hymns, Artemis appears briefly among the gods, only to return immediately to the mountains, choosing wilderness over power. Unlike many Olympian gods, she did not seek power over others. She did not build kingdoms. She did not command armies. She existed outside control. To the ancient Greeks, Artemis symbolized the part of life that cannot be owned, the wild landscape, the untamed spirit, the freedom beyond society's rules. Artemis reminded the Greeks that not everything could be civilized. Some forces must remain wild to preserve balance. She also embodied self-sufficiency. She did not depend on marriage. She did not depend on alliances. She did not need validation from other gods. This made her unique. Artemis remained one of the most widely honored goddesses in the Greek world. Her temples stood not in crowded cities, but near forests, mountains, and sacred springs. She was the quiet presence beyond civilization. She walked beside hunters, watched over young girls, guided mothers through childbirth, and enforced respect for the natural world. She did not demand devotion through fear. She inspired reverence through distance. Artemis never ruled. She never married. She never yielded. She remained forever free. The Greeks understood that some forces must remain untouched, not controlled, not possessed, not tamed. Artemis embodied that truth. She was the sound of footsteps in the forest, the arrow released before it is seen. She was the goddess of the wild, and the reminder that freedom always exists beyond the edges of civilization. If you enjoy uncovering the deeper truths behind ancient myths, subscribe to Ancient Untold Stories, because the oldest stories still have the most to reveal.